When my daughter told me to find somewhere else to die, "You're useless now." I folded sweaters with the same care I used to press her school uniforms. I packed my life into 2 suitcases and a hat box of photographs, like an obedient ghost, finally taking the hint. 3 days later, I sat beneath a humming ceiling fan in an old brick building off Bull Street, staring at my late husband's signature curling across a set of cream pages. Gideon Hollis, of Hollis and Bellamy in Savannah, slid his reading glasses lower on his nose and looked up at me the way a lighthouse looks at a storm. "Mrs. Navarro," he said, "I'm relieved you came." Before the papers, though, there was the moment that shattered the porcelain world I kept polished for 66 years. Cass was beautiful, even when vicious honey hair twisted high, a silk blouse the color of spite. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom I'd been using since Raphael's heart gave out 2 months earlier, and she assessed me the way you assess a piece of furniture you've always meant to replace. "The stairs aren't safe, Mom. The memories aren't healthy. You can't manage this house alone." Her husband Nathan lingered behind her, immaculate in a navy suit even on a Saturday, his smile thin as a letter opener. Their words were wrapped in perfume and efficiency. "We've made a decision," Cass said, depositing 2 hard-sided suitcases by the bed, as if we were already in transit. "Dad left everything to me. The house, the accounts. I've been letting you stay here out of kindness. But it's time to be realistic." I didn't say the first thing that rose in my throat. "Little girl, my body built you." I said, "This is my home." And for a moment, her expression slipped something cold showing through. Then she clicked it back into place. "There's an adorable senior complex on Abercorn. You'll have activities, friends. We'll help you move." Nathan lifted my bags as if he were taking out the recycling. "If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Then settle in. I'm going to tell you how I went from motel lobby widow to the woman holding all the cards. Honey, this story twists more than the live oaks on Jones Street. 2 months before the suitcases and the sentence that broke a mother's heart, I was Elena Navarro, former botanical illustrator, wife of Raphael for 43 years, mother of 1 spectacularly ungrateful daughter. When Raphael's heart stopped in his sleep at 72, the world turned quiet the way a gallery goes quiet after closing. Cass swept in with hydrangeas the size of doubts and a voice soft as a pitying pat. She orchestrated casseroles, coordinated black dresses, and guided mourners through the house like a docent. "This is so hard on Mom," she told friends, folding her hand over mine without warmth. Then she started leaving brochures on the kitchen island, smiling seniors in pastel cardigans, pickleball schedules, beige apartments with the personality of oatmeal. I mistook her efficiency for love. That's an old mistake, especially for women like me, women who learned young that devotion is a chore you never clock out of. Raphael used to tease that I sharpened pencils for a living, my illustrations, all those precise stipples and veins and leaves, but he never minded the patience it required. He told me patience was a gift. He was wrong. Patience is a habit. It can be unlearned. After the funeral, Cass and Nathan began dining at our house with a punctuality that felt like a strategy. They poured my wine without asking and moved through rooms I had dusted for decades as if conducting an inspection. "The foundation needs work," Nathan mused, fingertips skimming the mantle Raphael had sanded himself. "These utilities are archaic." Cass nodded gravely. "Mom, money is complicated. You never liked dealing with accounts." Each word separated me from my life, gentle as a scalpel. When grief fogs your brain, you map yourself using other people's sentences. They offered me directions I would later learn, led off a cliff. The morning she arrived with the suitcases started like any other. Black coffee, 1 slice of toast I only pretended to eat, an ache shaped like my husband in the bed I could not return to. I had moved to the guest room because grief made the master bedroom a museum exhibit. Cass didn't knock. She set the suitcases down and said what she'd come to say, with the briskness of a nurse changing a dressing. According to Dad's will, I inherited everything. I felt the room tilt. "There's been some mistake." "No mistake," she said, voice bright as a bell. "Someone rings to call the dog. Dad knew I'd take care of things. You were always the artistic one, the dreamer. This way, you'll be safe." Just the wife became its own kind of epitaph rattling in my ribs. "Find somewhere else to die," she added when I did not move quickly enough. "You're useless now." Some sentences are knives you're meant to swallow. I didn't. I wrapped the portraits I'd sketched of my daughter at 4 and 8 and 12 in a blanket and put them in the hat box with the photographs. I packed the dress Raphael had loved, the color of pomegranates, although I had no idea where I would wear it. Nathan carried my luggage to their gleaming SUV while Cass checked her watch. "We'll get the contractor in next week," she called toward the house. "Our house," she'd said earlier. She had already switched pronouns. They drove me to the Riverbend Lodge, which is a generous name for a motel that smelled like old smoke and lemon cleaner. The neon R buzzed like a gnat in my ear as we pulled in. Cass took out 2 crisp hundreds and folded them into my palm like a tip. "This should cover you while you get settled." Nathan didn't meet my eyes. "Independence will be good for you, Elena. No more property taxes, no more stairs. Freedom." Freedom, I learned, can feel like a door locking from the outside. After they left, I sat on the bedspread printed with wilting ferns and let the numbness pass. When it did, anger arrived quiet, muscular, undeniable. It had a spine. It stood up. All my life I had wielded tiny brushes, captured light trapped in petals, waited for new leaves to unfold. I was trained to notice the line the world draws between what's living and what only looks like it. Cass's concern looked like love. It was appetite. Raphael was many things old-world charming, stubborn as a live oak root, meticulously organized, but he was not cruel. Years ago he'd shown me our will, explained it with the thoroughness of a man who filed warranties by appliance and date. I remembered the shape of that conversation. It did not match the shape of Cass's claim. So I did something I should have done sooner. I used the Riverbend's spotty Wi-Fi to look up Hollis and Bellamy. The number on the website connected me to a woman with a voice like smooth stones. "Mr. Hollis can see you this afternoon," she said. "I'm so sorry for your loss." I still had a few dollars after bus fare. Savannah in August is a steam bath. The bus windows were fogged, my blouse stuck to my back, and every stop announced itself with a chime that sounded far too cheerful for the state of my heart. I clutched the hat box to keep it from jostling, as if the pictures inside might bruise. Gideon's office had the dignity of good wood and the smell of paper that mattered. He rose when I entered, took my hand in both of his, and said my name as if he were setting it on a shelf so it wouldn't fall. "Mrs. Navarro, I tried calling your house after the reading, but your daughter told me you were traveling to clear your head." "Traveling?" I said. In a way, I was. Straight to the edge of a life. He blinked twice, a habit people develop when a truth rings a bell only they can hear. "You weren't at the will reading?" "Number Cass said there was no need. She said Raphael left everything to her." Gideon's eyes sharpened. He opened a file the color of thunderclouds, slid out a stapled packet, and angled it toward me. "Your husband updated his will 6 months before he passed. He asked me to be tiresome in the way of the righteous." He smiled, the smallest movement. "I intend to honor him." I had never loved Raphael more than in that second, sitting before his neat signature. The clauses unrolled like a tide going out and revealing good stones beneath. The house at 1249 Wren Street to my beloved wife, Elena Navarro, including all furnishings and personal effects. 70% of all accounts and assets. To our daughter, Cassandra Whitmore, $10 million in trust, to be distributed beginning on her 45th birthday, contingent upon her respectful care of her mother in the year following my death. Respectful care. My husband had known our daughter as if he'd carved her from wood. I didn't weep. Not then. Something inside me, a spring I hadn't recognized until it uncoiled, lifted my shoulders, straightened my spine, steadied my breath. Across the desk, Gideon said, "What your daughter has done is elder fraud. It is also theft. If the documents she used are forged, it becomes a more serious matter still." He pressed his palm against an intercom button. "Celia, please get Detective Brooks at Savannah PD and ring Priya Desai." Then he looked back at me. "Mrs. Navarro, would you like your house keys back?" I reached for them, and the metal was warm from his hand, like something alive returning to its proper body. Victoria, that name belongs to another story. My daughter's name is Cass, and some people will always hear it as short for Cassandra and think of prophecy. I had ignored plenty of warnings from the God in my gut. I don't intend to ignore any more. I turned the keys in my fist until they pressed tiny half-moons into skin that still remembered painting veins in leaves. I have always known how to draw a line. I was about to learn I knew how to cross one. The Riverbend Lodge clerk, a boy with chipped black nail polish and a heart that beat too far forward in his chest, watched me come and go like a tide chart nobody had posted by the counter. The morning after I visited Gideon, he slid a brown paper bag across the desk. Inside, a banana, a bottled water, 2 hard-boiled eggs wrapped in plastic. "My aunt says grief makes you forget to eat," he murmured. "I'm Jonah." I thanked him. And for the rest of this story, you should know he will appear in small ways that mattered more than the grand gestures of people with better shoes. Detective Imani Brooks met me at Hollis and Bellamy that afternoon. She had the calm of a woman who'd seen the worst versions of people and still believed in the point of paper. She took my statement with precision, asked for every detail of Cass's eviction speech, and didn't wince when I said the sentence about dying out loud. "We're going to put a hold on any transfers your daughter initiated," she said. "Utilities, accounts, deed filings. If forged documents were used, we'll find the fingerprints, even if the hands that wore them are wearing gloves." Priya Desai swept in on a breeze of jasmine and competence. "Private investigations," her card read. But what it meant was that Priya found the seams in people's lies and pulled. She was younger than I expected, and older than she looked, with steady eyes and a leather notebook scuffed in the places where the truth usually hides. "I like timelines," she said, uncapping a pen. "Tell me the day your house started speaking in your daughter's voice." We built a chronology on Gideon's conference table: funeral, dinners, brochures, the arrival with suitcases, the cash pressed into my palm like a bribe to leave my own life. Priya underlined 2 dates. "Print vendor here," she said, tapping a week in which Nathan had taken an unusual number of midday calls. "And here." She circled the day Cass had walked in without knocking. People who plan to steal always rehearse their kindnesses. Within 2 hours, the bank froze every account that bore Raphael's name or mine, pending verification. Cass's newly minted credit cards shuddered. Her attempt to transfer utilities snapped back like a rubber band breaking across the wrist. I imagined her standing in my kitchen. Her kitchen, she'd think stabbing at her phone while the refrigerator hummed in solidarity with me. At 3:17 p.m., my phone rang. The screen said Cass in sharp white letters that suddenly looked juvenile. I answered and swallowed my heartbeat. "Mom, there's some kind of glitch with Daddy's accounts," she said, voice already fraying. "They're saying assets are frozen. What did you do?" "I'm at Hollis and Bellamy," I said. "Gideon remembers you well from the will reading you told him I missed because I was traveling. Detective Brooks says hello." Silence clanged. Then, bright falseness. "Mom, you're confused. You know how grief—" "What I know," I said, "is that Raphael left me the house and 70% of everything. What I know is that he left you 10 million, contingent on how you treated me. You failed the test before breakfast." "Contingent?" The word caught in her teeth. I pictured her selecting it with tweezers as if it might be defective. "That's not possible. Ask Nathan to define it," I said. "He knows his way around conditions. He'll also want to speak to Detective Brooks about forgery statutes. She shifted registers, the way she did at age 13 when she wanted the car keys early. "Mom, please, let's meet. We can work this out." "Of course we'll meet," I said. In court, Gideon put a hand over the receiver of his desk phone to conceal a smile he didn't want to show me too soon. "You have options," he said after I hung up. "Criminal charges will proceed regardless. Civilly, we will petition for immediate possession and a restraining order to keep her out of Wren Street while we sort the rest. Are you prepared for the fallout?" Prepared is a word people use when they mean armored. I wasn't armored. I was awake. "Yes," I said, "I am." Here is something about grief. It erases, and then it reveals. In the 6 weeks after Raphael died, the house had been a museum I trudged through on silent feet. Now the rooms of my mind started to throw open windows. I could feel air moving. That night, Priya called from her car where rain pebbled the windshield. "We found the vendor," she said, "a boutique print shop in a strip of fancy stores off Victory Drive. They do discreet work for discerning clients' wedding invitations, debutante programs, and, when properly compensated, documents they never officially touched." "Nathan?" "His assistant," she said. "But the trail smells like his cologne." By morning, Detective Brooks had a warrant. By evening, Cass was in a sheath dress at La Serena, our city's latest temple to foam and microgreens, when 2 officers approached her table and asked her to stand. She announced false arrest and demanded to call her attorney. The attorney, brought in by Nathan, turned out to be his golfing friend, excellent at wills, allergic to criminal procedure. The next morning, Nathan tried to walk into Seaward Capital as if confidence were a disguise. Confidence is not a disguise. It's a description. He was arrested by the escalators. I slept in my bed that night. Mine. The hinges groaned like old men right before a punchline. Cass had already colonized the master closet with a forest of silk and a ranch of suede. I slid hangers along the pole and cleared a path to the back wall where Raphael had kept his shoehorn. I carried her clothes into the hallway and set them in contractor bags. In the morning, I tied the bags tight, hauled them to the porch, and left them beside the azaleas. If you are not a mother, you may judge me for the pleasure that gave me. If you are, you will understand that sometimes love wears steel-toed boots. News travels on rails when the tracks are gossip, and dignity is a whistle nobody hears. By lunchtime, a reporter named Tessa Bloom from Local 9 News was leaving me careful voicemails. "Miss Navarro, your case could help other families detect financial abuse early. We'd love to hear your story on your terms." I pressed delete, then listened again, then did not. I set the phone down on the counter and placed a paperweight on top of it as if I could hold the world still with 4 ounces of blue glass. Around 3, a Jaguar the color of envy purred into my driveway. The woman who got out of it wore pearls like armor and heels that knew how to stab grass. "Mrs. Navarro," she said when I opened the door. "I'm Marion Cole, Nathan's mother. We should talk." I offered her the porch, not the parlor. She took the wicker chair and arranged herself as if the city had been built to position her well. "I'm here because this has all gotten out of hand," she said, tone suggesting I'd left the hose on too long and flooded something delicate. "Kevin, pardon me, Nathan made some poor choices, certainly, but prison helps no one. We can resolve this privately." She slid a cream envelope from her handbag and tapped it twice. $2 million to compensate you for your inconvenience in exchange for dropping charges against my son. "Inconvenience," I repeated, tasting the syllables like a seed I wasn't sure whether to spit or plant. "5, she said, misreading my silence as bargaining. "Final offer. Your son participated in forging legal documents," I said. "He helped throw me out of my home and suggested I enjoy my independence in a motel that rents rooms by the hour to regret. And you are offering to tip me for not calling the police?" Marion's polite mask thinned, and I saw the bone beneath. "Kevin," she corrected herself, flustered again. Nathan has a career, a reputation, and there are details about your husband's past business dealings that might embarrass everyone if aired in court. She didn't say the words money laundering. She let them slither in on their own. After she left, the air in the house felt dusted with a fine powder of dread. I stood in Raphael's study, the room that, for decades, had not been mine, and pulled open drawers, receipts, ledgers, folders labeled with neat dates and tidy names. Numbers lined up like soldiers standing for inspection. I had always found comfort in order. That night, order began to look like choreography. Priya arrived with a portable scanner and a brain like a bolt cutter. We stacked papers into yes and no, and maybe piles until midnight. Some payments had gone to companies whose websites were skeletons with their clothes on. Consulting fees had been paid for services as specific as fog. Schedules with red ticks lined up with dates. I later learned meant something ugly on the Savannah waterfront shipments that didn't appear on any manifest. Priya pushed back from the desk, and the leather chair squeaked like a witness who'd finally tell the truth. "Elena," she said softly, "I think Raphael's firm was used as a washing station." "For what?" "For the Marconi Syndicate. They've run the coast for years quietly, efficiently, like barnacles that have figured out how to open bank accounts. My husband, who brought me magnolias every May, who warmed my paint water with the kettle in winter because he said artists deserve tea, who filed receipts by vendor and color-coded the tax binders, my husband, laundering money for men who don't say please." I sat very still. Grief reassembled itself and found a new edge. "What does this mean?" I asked. "For the house? For me?" "If the feds confirm the flow is dirty," Priya said, "assets can be seized as proceeds. Sometimes they leave the primary residence to the widow, sometimes not. It depends." "On what?" "Stories," she said, not unkindly. "Theirs and yours." Around midnight, my phone lit the desk with Cass's name. I stared at it until the ringing stopped, started again, stopped. On the third try, I answered. "Mom," she said, voice shredded. "There are things you need to know about Dad. Nathan's lawyers can make this go away. You keep the house and $5 million in clean assets. We walk. But we have to move fast." The word clean clanged. "Everything else?" I asked. "Goes to the government." "Mom, please. It's the only practical option. Practical is what people call mercy when it benefits them most." I told her I needed the night. When I hung up, I realized my hands were steady. Fear had stopped being a temperature and become a task. The keys to Wren Street lay on Raphael's desk. I closed my fingers around them and felt the metal teeth bite my skin. Then I called Priya. "How quickly?" I asked. "Can you get me a meeting with the FBI? I'd like to tell them a story myself." Gideon's office the next morning smelled of lemon polish and quiet war. He had arranged the meeting with the speed of a man who'd spent his career balancing patience with the occasional sprint. "Elena," he said when I stepped inside, "today you'll tell the truth once. After that, we'll let others repeat it for you." Detective Imani Brooks was already at the long oak table, her blazer the color of midnight and her notebook squared to the edge. Beside her sat a woman in a gray suit, small gold studs in her ears, expression unreadable. "Agent Naomi Granger," Gideon said. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." The words settled like pebbles in a pond, each ripple reaching farther than the last. Agent Granger's handshake was firm but not performative. "Mrs. Navarro," she said, "we appreciate you coming voluntarily. That matters." I placed Raphael's hat box on the table as if it were evidence. The photographs inside were not relevant to the law, but they were relevant to me. They were the map of who I'd been before my daughter tried to erase me. I told the story. How Cass arrived with her suitcases. How Nathan had avoided my eyes as if guilt were contagious. How Cass shoved brochures at me with the same cheer she used to shove peas around her plate when she was 10. How I found myself in the Riverbend Lodge with $200 and the echo of a sentence no mother should ever hear. When I finished, Agent Granger leaned forward. "Mrs. Navarro, if we move forward, you'll need to accept that your husband may not have been the man you thought he was. Are you prepared for that?" Prepared. There was that word again. Armor disguised as vocabulary. "I'm prepared," I said. Though what I meant was, I'd rather be startled by the truth than sheltered by a lie. Gideon slid the updated will across the table. Granger studied the clauses, underlined the contingency language, and nodded once. "This document is clean, which means what your daughter presented was dirty." She looked up, her eyes narrowing just enough to signal intention. "Mrs. Navarro, would you be willing to wear a wire?" The air shifted. Detective Brooks sat back, watching me as if my answer would decide which train the day would board. "A wire," I repeated, "to record your daughter and son-in-law attempting to coerce you into their arrangement. It would strengthen our case for conspiracy and fraud. In another life, the one with casseroles and PTA meetings and weekends sketching lilies, I would have trembled. In this life, the one where I'd been told to find somewhere to die, I did not tremble. "Yes," I said. "I'll do it." Priya entered with a leather case, clicked it open, and revealed a device smaller than a matchbox. "We'll place it beneath your blouse seam," she said, matter of fact. "You'll invite them over, act compliant, get them talking." Granger added, "Don't press, just let them reveal themselves. People who think they're in control rarely stop talking." The plan solidified around me like scaffolding around a building. A meeting that evening at Wren Street. Cass and Nathan would arrive with their arrogance in a briefcase. I would pour wine. I would listen. The FBI would be in the next room, their pens poised to write history. On the bus ride back to the Riverbend, I touched the spot near my collarbone where the wire would sit. Jonah, behind the counter when I returned, noticed the steadiness in my step. "You look different," he said. "I am different," I answered. Later, in the quiet of my motel room, I rehearsed nothing. Because this wasn't theater. This was truth, finally sharpened enough to cut. I thought of Cass's voice, sweet as syrup when she wanted, sharp as glass when she didn't. I thought of Nathan's careful detachment, the way men like him used silence as a weapon. And I thought of Raphael, of the possibility that the life I'd lived beside him had been lit by shadows I'd chosen not to see. The clock ticked louder than usual. Each second was a question. Who had my husband really been? Who was my daughter becoming? And who, finally, was I? By the time the sun rose, I had one answer. I was no longer patient. Evening fell with the weight of magnolia air, sticky and perfumed, when I unlocked the front door of 1249 Wren Street for the first time in nearly 2 months. The porch light flickered, catching moths mid-flight, as if even they were restless witnesses. Inside, I set out 2 glasses and a bottle of Pinot Cass, had gifted me for Mother's Day years ago, back when gifts still came wrapped in sincerity instead of strategy. The wire was taped beneath my blouse, its tiny hum the loudest secret in the house. Cass and Nathan arrived promptly at 8, like bankers attending a deal instead of children entering a home. Cass kissed my cheek, her perfume citrus and calculation. Nathan carried a leather briefcase as though the papers inside were commandments. "Mom, you look better," Cass said, her tone carefully balanced between patronizing and persuasive. "I feel better," I answered, pouring wine. "Clarity has that effect." Nathan wasted no time. He flipped open the case, spreading documents across Raphael's polished table. "Our attorneys have structured a very favorable resolution," he said. "You keep the house. You retain $5 million in clean assets. No questions from the IRS, no messy trials. Everyone walks away." "Clean assets," I repeated, letting the phrase hang. Cass leaned forward, her hand grazing the back of mine as though maternal affection were currency. "Mom, this is best for all of us. Think about your health, stability. No more stress. I sipped my wine and let silence sit between us until it began to fidget. And what about the 33 million my husband left me? Cass flinched as if I'd cursed. Nathan's expression tightened. That money is compromised, he said flatly. Tainted by Raphael's associations. It will be seized eventually. Taking 5 million ensures you're protected. Protected from what? I asked softly. The truth? Nathan's eyes darted to Cass. This isn't about truth. It's about survival. You'll lose everything otherwise. I smiled then, not sweetly, not bitterly, but like a woman who had stopped mistaking fear for obedience. And you two? What do you gain? Cass inhaled sharply, her mask slipping for just a heartbeat. We get to move on. Daddy would want that. No, I said, steady. Daddy wanted you to treat me with dignity. He built a clause around it. You failed before the ink was dry. For a moment, the only sound was the old grandfather clock in the hall, marking time like a judge. Then Nathan shoved the papers toward me. Sign. Tonight, or you'll regret it. And that was when Agent Naomi Granger stepped through the archway, flanked by 2 agents with badges and the calm precision of inevitability. Mr. Cole, Mrs. Whitmore, she said, her voice crisp as a snapped branch. This conversation has been recorded in full. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder abuse, and attempted extortion of a federal witness. Cass's wine glass shattered against the floor. Mom, she shrieked. How could you? The same way you forged documents and told me to die somewhere else, I said. My voice did not rise. It didn't need to. Nathan stood, reaching instinctively for his briefcase. One of the agents took it before he touched the handle. His shoulders slumped, as though the air had finally admitted what he refused to. Cass turned to me, mascara streaking in frantic lines. We're family. You don't betray family. Family, I whispered, doesn't treat blood like collateral. The agents read their rights in tones that made the words sound carved in stone. Cass pleaded. Nathan tried to bargain. Neither understood that bargaining only works when you still have something worth trading. When the front door closed behind them, the silence felt larger than the house itself. Gideon, who had watched from the kitchen with arms crossed, approached me slowly. Mrs. Navarro, he said, you were remarkable. No, I said, staring at the shards of glass glinting on the floor. I was finally myself. I bent, gathered the broken pieces with a dish towel, and tossed them into the trash. Then I locked the door behind me, not as a woman shutting out danger, but as a queen securing her castle. The morning after the arrests, Savannah woke humid and unrepentant, as if the city itself had no intention of apologizing for what had unfolded inside my house. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, sunlight pooling on the tiled floor, and listened to the silence that finally belonged to me. For the first time in decades, Wren Street was mine alone, not Raphael's stage, not Cass's inheritance, not Nathan's investment. Mine. Detective Imani Brooks called before breakfast. Mrs. Navarro, she said, voice brisk but softened at the edges, your daughter is being arraigned at 10. Bond is likely, but the accounts remain frozen. Nathan's hearing will follow tomorrow. He faces additional charges tied to the printing shop. We'll need you to provide a victim impact statement when the time comes. Victim, I repeated. The word sat uneasily on my tongue. Number survivor, and eventually, something stronger than that. She chuckled low. Say the word, and I'll adjust the paperwork. After we hung up, I padded through the master suite. Cass's perfume still lingered in the air, cloying as apologies never made. Drawers overflowed with silk and sequins she had dragged into my husband's closet. Raphael's order shirts arranged by sleeve length, ties rolled like soldiers at rest was gone. Chaos had colonized. I grabbed heavy-duty trash bags from the pantry. One by one, I stuffed Cass's garments into them. Sequins scratched my arms. Silk slithered through my fingers like betrayal. I tied each bag with the precision of a sailor knot and hauled them onto the porch. They sagged against the azaleas, waiting for her return on bail. The sight gave me a satisfaction so sharp it bordered on pain. Some victories are small and petty, but they still count. Later that afternoon, Priya arrived with a cardboard box of files she'd retrieved from the printing vendor. She spread invoices across my dining table like tarot cards. "The forgery was sophisticated," she said, tapping one document. But Nathan left a fingerprint trail. His assistant handled the orders, but he approved the payments directly. They used the firm's corporate account. Bold and stupid. The feds love that combination. I watched her work, feeling the room shift under me. For years, I had been the woman who sharpened pencils, folded laundry, cataloged bills. Now I was command central for an investigation that had the power to unravel my daughter's life and mine. In the evening, Jonah from the riverbend knocked at my door. He stood awkwardly on the porch, holding a small potted fern. "For your house," he said. "Every place deserves something green." I took the plant, humbled. "You've already given me more kindness than my own child." He shrugged, cheeks red. "You never know who you're helping, or who's watching." That night, I moved into Raphael's study. For decades it had been his sanctuary mahogany desk, polished to a shine, ledgers stacked with military neatness, walls lined with books he claimed he would read one day. I sat in his leather chair, breathing in the ghost of his cologne, and realized I had never truly entered this room until now. It was time to make it mine. I opened the curtains. The night air carried jasmine and the far-off hum of cicadas. A room that once felt like a shrine suddenly looked like possibility. I pulled out a canvas from the hall closet, one I hadn't touched since Cass was a child. My brushes were brittle, my paints half-dried, but the instinct was still in me. I set the canvas on the easel and mixed a shade of green that matched the fern Jonah had given me. The first stroke trembled, but the second was steady. By midnight, the canvas bore the beginnings of a tree roots gripping hard into soil, branches lifting despite the weight. As I painted, I remembered Raphael's voice telling me that patience was a gift. I smiled bitterly. "No, Raphael. Patience is a leash." And tonight, I cut it. The phone rang just after midnight, unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice slid through the line, smooth and deliberate. "Mrs. Navarro, this is Marion Cole. I trust we can have a civilized conversation tomorrow. There are matters we need to resolve for everyone's sake." I glanced at the fern on the table, its leaves unfurling under the lamplight. "Tomorrow, then," I said, my voice steady, as the paint drying on the canvas. I hung up knowing that when Marion came, she wouldn't bring flowers. She'd bring knives wrapped in silk. Marion Cole arrived at Wren Street just after noon the following day, her Jaguar gleaming like a polished threat against the backdrop of my cracked driveway. She stepped out in a cream suit, pearls wound tight around her neck, and heels that pierced the ground as if claiming dominion. Everything about her announced breeding, money, and the confidence of someone who had never been told no. "Mrs. Navarro," she said, offering me a smile as taut as a violin string. "I do hope we can keep this civil." I led her only as far as the porch. She hesitated, clearly unaccustomed to being denied entry, before lowering herself into the wicker chair. She crossed her legs with precision, as if the porch were a stage and I was the unwelcome audience. "I'm here because this situation has spiraled," she began, voice polished with old money charm. "Kevin, pardon me. Nathan may have made some unfortunate choices, but pursuing prison helps no one. Think of your reputation, your peace. We can resolve this quietly." She slid a cream-colored envelope from her handbag and tapped it twice on her knee before setting it on the table between us. $2 million. Yours immediately, in exchange for dropping the charges." "Inconvenience money," I said, refusing to touch the envelope. Her smile faltered. "5, she countered smoothly, as if negotiating the price of an antique rug. Final offer. The audacity nearly made me laugh. Your son-in-law forged documents and helped my daughter throw me out of my own house. 5 million is the price of silence? Not justice. The pearls at her throat glimmered. Justice? She repeated with faint amusement. Justice destroys families, Mrs. Navarro. Surely you don't want that. Kevin has children, a career, a reputation. Wouldn't it be kinder to let him recover quietly, for all of your sakes? I leaned forward, my voice low. Justice is when the truth isn't buried under money. Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the porcelain. She smoothed it quickly, but not quickly enough. There are, she said carefully, details about your husband's business dealings, details that could be embarrassing if aired in open court. I would hate for his legacy and yours to be tarnished. The threat was velvet-wrapped, but the blade beneath gleamed. You're implying Raphael was not the man he appeared to be, I said. Marian's lips curved. I'm not implying anything. I'm saying that information exists. If you continue down this path, it may come to light. Why not take the generous offer and spare everyone the spectacle? She rose without waiting for my answer, smoothing her skirt as though she had already won. Think on it, Mrs. Navarro. Pride is expensive. When her Jaguar purred away, the air felt heavier. I carried the untouched envelope into the kitchen, dropped it onto the counter, and stared at it as if it might open itself. $2 million, neat and immediate. A fortune to some, a bribe to me. That night, I returned to Raphael's study with Priya. We stacked ledgers and receipts under the lamplight, searching for the ghost Marian had hinted at. The room smelled of dust and lemon oil, the scent of order. But the numbers we uncovered told another story, consulting fees to shell companies, payments for services no one had rendered, timelines that aligned too neatly with whispers of contraband shipments through the Savannah docks. Your husband was meticulous, Priya said, frowning at a ledger. But some of these payments, Elena, they don't belong in clean business. They're too precise, too regular, like laundering cycles. The word sat in the room like smoke. My Raphael? I whispered. Number, he wouldn't. Priya's expression was kind but steady. If Marian knows, she'll use it, and if the feds confirm it, assets tied to him could be seized. I gripped the edge of the desk until my knuckles blanched. The man who had surprised me with wildflowers on Wednesdays, who kissed paint from my fingertips, who kept every receipt in tidy folders. Had he built this house on dirty money? The fern Jonah had given me sat by the window, reaching toward the lamplight. I stared at its leaves and realized survival often grows out of soil that isn't pure. My phone rang. Cass. Her voice was frantic, shredded. Mom, please, we need to talk. There are things about Dad you don't understand. Nathan's lawyers have a plan that can save us all. You keep the house. 5 million in clean assets. We walk away. The echo of Marian's words clanged through me. 5 million, I said. So that's the going rate for my silence? Mom, Cass begged, it's the only practical choice. I looked at Raphael's ledgers spread across the desk, at numbers that whispered betrayal. Then tomorrow, I said, my voice cold, I'll choose something other than practical. I hung up. The house creaked around me, as if waiting for the storm about to break. Dawn slid over Savannah like a bruise spreading across the sky. I hadn't slept. Instead, I sat in Raphael's study surrounded by neat stacks of paper that suddenly looked like a crime scene. His handwriting, so precise, so familiar, marched across ledgers and invoices, but the patterns beneath them were ugly. Shell companies, phantom consulting fees, payments that moved in circles instead of lines. Priya returned mid-morning, carrying her portable scanner and the sharp smell of rain in her coat. She spent 6 hours photographing, cross-referencing, building what she called the real picture. By late afternoon, she closed her notebook and looked at me with eyes that held no triumph, only pity. Elena, she said softly, your husband's firm wasn't just careless, He was running a laundering operation. The word felt heavier this time, undeniable. For who? My voice cracked. The Marconi Syndicate. They've been using small firms like Raphael's for decades. Coastal routes, shell businesses, just enough legitimacy to pass casual audits. Based on these records, he was moving millions every year, for at least 12 years. 12 years. While I sketched wild irises and taught Cass to braid her hair, Raphael had been ferrying ghosts through clean books. No, I whispered, shaking my head. He was stubborn, meticulous, controlling, yes, but not criminal. He wasn't cruel. Criminals aren't always cruel, Priya said gently. Sometimes they compartmentalize. Sometimes they hide things even from the people they love. The fern Jonah had given me sat on the windowsill, its leaves trembling in the fan's breeze. I focused on it to keep from drowning. If this is true, what happens to me? To the house? Priya hesitated. If the FBI confirms the money was dirty, they could seize everything. Sometimes widows keep the primary residence if they can prove ignorance. But the accounts, investments gone. The air in the study grew too thick. I opened the window, letting in the humid chorus of cicadas. Outside, Wren Street looked unchanged. Children on bicycles, a dog barking at nothing, azaleas drooping under the heat. How could the world look ordinary when mine was unraveling? That evening, my phone rang again. Cass. Her voice was a frayed rope. Mom, listen to me carefully. Nathan's lawyers are already in contact with the FBI. They'll negotiate immunity for him in exchange for information about Dad's activities. You keep the house and $5 million in clean assets. We drop the fraud charges. Everyone walks away. Everyone. The word burned. And you? I asked. Our records are wiped clean, she said quickly. No prison, no headlines. We all move on. It was extortion dressed as mercy. Victoria would. I stopped myself. Cass, do you even hear yourself? You stole my house. You told me to die somewhere else. And now you want me to partner in your scheme to bury your father's crimes? I'm trying to save us, she snapped. Don't be naive, Mom. If you fight this, you'll lose everything. The government will take it all. You'll be left with nothing. Her words should have frightened me. Instead, they clarified something. I'd already been left with nothing once by her, and maybe now by Raphael, and I had survived. I need time, I said. You don't have time, she hissed. The FBI meeting is tomorrow. Nathan's lawyer needs an answer tonight. After she hung up, I sat in the study's heavy silence. My husband's ledgers were stacked in front of me, evidence of a life I might never fully understand. My daughter's voice still rang in my ears, bargaining with my survival as though it were a discount to be negotiated. For decades, I had been Elena Navarro, patient, obedient, invisible. That woman had died the night Cass put suitcases at my feet. What remained was someone else, someone who could not be bribed into silence or bullied into complicity. I picked up the phone and called Priya. How quickly? I asked, my voice steady as the tide. Can you get me a meeting with the FBI? If my daughter thinks she can sell them her version of Raphael's life, I'll make sure they hear mine first. The next morning, Gideon's conference room smelled faintly of old books and lemon polish, a sanctuary for truth disguised as law. Agent Naomi Granger sat at the head of the table, her pen poised above a yellow legal pad, eyes sharp and unblinking. Detective Brooks flanked her, calm and deliberate, while Priya set up her laptop like a surgeon preparing instruments. Mrs. Navarro, Agent Granger began, by coming forward voluntarily, you're placing yourself at risk. If you benefited from laundered proceeds, even unknowingly, there could be consequences. Do you understand? I do, I said, folding my hands on the polished oak. But I'd rather stand in the fire than let my daughter and her husband sell my silence. Her eyes softened just slightly. Good. Then we'll need your cooperation. Full cooperation. I laid out everything. Raphael's ledgers, Marion Cole's visit and her velvet threats, Cass's late-night call offering me $5 million as hush money, Nathan's plan to barter immunity in exchange for Raphael's sins. Each word scraped raw coming out of me, but once spoken, they carried a weight that felt freeing. When I finished, Agent Granger leaned back, tapping her pen against the pad. "You've given us enough to move forward, but we'll need more." "What more?" She studied me, measuring. "Would you be willing to wear a wire tonight? Invite your daughter and son-in-law over. Let them speak freely. We'll be in the next room." A wire. The word vibrated through me like a struck string. I thought of Cass's face when she told me to find somewhere else to die, of Nathan's careful silence as he loaded my suitcases into their SUV. They believed me powerless. They believed patience was my only language. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I'll wear it." Priya smiled faintly, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. "We'll tape it just under your blouse seam. Invisible. You won't have to push them. People who think they're in control always volunteer more than they should." Gideon poured me a glass of water. "Elena, are you sure? This isn't a performance, this is evidence." I met his gaze. "I've been performing for 66 years. Wife, mother, widow, tonight, I'll stop performing." That evening, I returned to Wren Street with the wire taped against my collarbone, its hum like a second heartbeat. The agents waited in the dining room, hidden, but close. I set out wine glasses, lit the candles Cass had once insisted were too tacky, and opened the door when their knock came sharp and punctual. Cass swept inside first, her perfume sharp with desperation. Nathan followed, briefcase in hand, his expression the calm of a man who thought he'd already won. "Mom," Cass said, pressing a kiss to my cheek, "you look better, see? Independence suits you." I gestured toward the table. "Sit, let's talk." Nathan wasted no time. He spread documents across the table, the ink still smelling of arrogance. "Here's how this works. You retain the house. You get $5 million in clean assets. No IRS scrutiny, no trials, no humiliation. Everyone moves forward. Clean assets," I repeated, swirling my wine. "And the rest?" "Compromised," Nathan said flatly. "It will be seized anyway. This way you keep something. Without us, you'll lose everything." Cass leaned forward, her eyes glistening. "Mom, this is practical. Daddy would want stability, for all of us." I let silence stretch until their smiles faltered. Then I asked, "And what do you gain?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "Immunity, reputation intact, the chance to rebuild." I set down my glass. "And what if I say no?" His voice dropped, hard as steel. "Then you'll regret it." And that was the moment Agent Granger stepped through the doorway, flanked by 2 agents with badges gleaming under the chandelier. "Mr. Cole, Mrs. Whitmore," she said, her voice calm and absolute. "This conversation has been recorded in full. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and attempted extortion of a federal witness." Cass gasped, wineglass tumbling and shattering across the floor. "Mom, how could you?" "The same way you forged documents and told me to die," I said. My voice was level, not raised. Nathan reached for his briefcase. An agent took it before his fingers touched the handle. His face collapsed in on itself, all calculations failing at once. As they read rights aloud, Cass wept, mascara streaking down her cheeks, a child caught in her own snare. "We're family," she sobbed. "Family doesn't betray family." I stood, feeling the wire warm against my skin. Family doesn't use blood as collateral. When the door closed behind them, silence swelled. The agents packed up their equipment. Priya offered me a small nod, and Gideon pressed my hand with a reverence I hadn't felt in years. I swept up the broken glass, dropped it into the trash, and locked the door behind me. Not as a woman frightened of shadows, but as the rightful keeper of her own house. When the sirens faded into Savannah's sticky night, the house exhaled as if it had been holding its breath. I stood alone in the entryway, the faint buzz of the wire still clinging to my skin. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't trembling. I wasn't small. I wasn't waiting for permission to exist. Agent Granger returned the next morning, her expression sharp, but carrying something gentler in her eyes. She placed a thick folder on Gideon's conference table. "Mrs. Navarro, you need to see this." Inside were documents, photographs, transcripts, 12 years' worth of Raphael's other life. "Your husband wasn't just laundering money," she said. "He was working for us. An embedded cooperator." The room tilted. "For you?" She nodded. Raphael acted as an informant for the Bureau, providing intelligence on the Marconi syndicate while appearing to facilitate their operations. It was one of the longest-running deep-cover stings on the coast. Those accounts Cass and Nathan tried to seize, they're clean. The Bureau authorized Raphael to keep a percentage of the laundered funds as cover. "Every cent he left you is lawful." I gripped the edge of the table, heat rushing into my face. Relief and fury fought inside me. Raphael, my Raphael, had died with secrets sharp enough to wound me even now. "He never told me," I whispered. "He couldn't," Agent Granger said gently, "for his safety and for yours. But he trusted you would one day learn the truth the right way. Last year, he updated his will with those contingencies. He anticipated exactly what your daughter might do." I closed my eyes, hearing Raphael's voice in memory, his quiet reassurances, his insistence on filing everything neatly, his warnings that patience had its limits. He had been preparing me all along, though I hadn't known it. "Does Cass know any of this?" I asked. Agent Granger shook her head. They suspected corruption, not cooperation. They tried to blackmail you with incomplete information. Instead, they gave us leverage. The irony, Mrs. Navarro, is exquisite. I almost laughed, though it came out strangled. Cass had stolen my house, lied about the will, offered me $5 million like a bribe, and in her desperation, she had managed to hand me the very evidence that destroyed her. "What happens to them now?" I asked. "They'll be indicted on multiple counts. Fraud, conspiracy, extortion. Nathan may face additional charges tied to prior schemes. They'll likely serve time. And me?" Agent Granger's gaze steadied on mine. "You, Mrs. Navarro, are the legal heir to $33 million, the Wren Street house, and every legitimate asset Raphael left behind. You are not only safe, you are solvent, powerful." The word felt foreign on my tongue. Powerful. For years I'd been Raphael's wife, Cass's mother, the quiet caretaker of everyone else's life. Now I was something else, something larger. I walked out of Gideon's office that day into sunlight that seemed brighter than Savannah had any right to offer. People on the street bustled past, unaware that an old woman had just been reborn in the chambers above. That night, I sat in my study now, and unpacked fresh paints and brushes from the art store downtown. The canvas waited on the easel. I dipped my brush into a green so vivid it glowed, and with a steady hand, I painted the first line of a tree stretching skyward. I thought of Cass's tear-streaked face when the agents cuffed her wrists. I thought of Raphael's hidden life, his double-edged devotion. I thought of myself no longer patient, no longer silent, no longer obedient. For the first time in decades, I belonged entirely to me. 6 months later, Savannah had forgotten how to whisper my name. It spoke it loudly now through newspapers, through courthouse steps, through neighbors who watched me wheel groceries into my own house on Wren Street. Elena Navarro, widow, survivor, millionaire. Cass and Nathan had been sentenced to 18 months apiece, their mugshots tucked between election scandals and weather forecasts. Seaward Capital dropped Nathan like a rusted anchor. Cass's social circle shrank overnight. Friends who once toasted her with champagne now crossed streets to avoid being associated. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt steady, like a tree finally allowed to grow without pruning shears. The study had transformed. Raphael's ledgers were boxed and sealed in the FBI's evidence vault. In their place, canvases. Some were wild with color, others delicate with detail, but each carried the pulse of a woman who had finally reclaimed her voice. The fern Jonah had given me thrived in the corner, stretching toward the window as though it too understood resurrection. It was Jonah, in fact, who knocked on my door one humid afternoon carrying an envelope with trembling hands. "Scholarship acceptance," he grinned, cheeks flushed. "Savannah School of Art. Full ride." I hugged him harder than propriety might allow. "You see," I said, "kindness pays compound interest." Later that evening, Priya and her sister Soraya joined me at the dining table, papers spread between us. "The Navarro Trust for Elder Justice is officially registered," Soraya said. 15 million seated, more pledged. Legal aid clinics, policy advocacy, scholarships. Your story is already opening doors. My story. Strange to think of it that way, but it was true. Tessa Bloom's feature on elder financial abuse had aired weeks before, and offers poured in speaking engagements, interviews, even a documentary deal from Netflix. I agreed only if the profits flowed into the trust. If I had been turned into a spectacle, I would weaponize it for others. Cass wrote to me from prison 17 letters in 6 months. At first they dripped with justification. "I only wanted to protect you." Later they begged, "I'm still your daughter." The last few were desperate prayers scrawled in a shaky hand. I stopped reading after the 5th. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt with paper. Still, sometimes at night I dreamt of her as a child, hair tangled from sleep, climbing into my lap with picture books. Those dreams hurt, but they also reminded me of something essential. I had loved her fully once. I could not love the woman she chose to become. One Sunday morning, Agent Granger visited with news. The Marconi Syndicate trials had begun. 47 indictments, 200 million seized. "Your husband's cooperation was critical," she told me. "He helped us dismantle an empire." I stood in the doorway after she left, thinking of Raphael. He had lived 2 lives, one beside me, one inside shadows. He had kept me safe by keeping me ignorant. I would never fully forgive him for that, but I understood it now. In his flawed way, he had been fighting for me. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and painted a self-portrait. Not of the grieving widow who once cowered in a motel room, nor the obedient wife who lived in Raphael's shadow, nor the discarded mother Cass tried to erase. This portrait showed a woman in sunlight, her face turned forward, unafraid. When I finished, I stepped back and whispered to the canvas, "Powerful." For the first time, the word belonged to me. By spring, the house on Wren Street no longer looked like Raphael's shrine. It looked like mine. The curtains were light linen, not the heavy drapes he preferred. The kitchen gleamed with counters I had chosen. Not granite Nathan once suggested would raise resale value. The study was now an art studio filled with canvases that smelled of turpentine and liberation. Every morning I brewed coffee, opened the windows, and let the city's humid breath roll through. Savannah was waking differently for me now. Neighbors waved longer. Strangers stopped to thank me. Headlines had branded me the grandmother who fought back, though I was neither frail nor finished. The Navarro Trust for Elder Justice had taken root. We funded legal clinics in 3 counties, hired attorneys who knew how to untangle financial webs, and launched hotlines staffed by patient voices. At one ceremony, a woman with trembling hands clasped mine and whispered, "Because of you, they can't take my house." I carried that sentence home like treasure. Netflix sent a crew to film the beginnings of a docu-series. They called it The Magnolia Clause. Cameras followed me as I painted, as I walked Jonah through scholarship forms, as I stood on courthouse steps beside other women who had been silenced. It was surreal, but I allowed it not for fame, but for warning. If Cass had thought she could erase me quietly, The world would now hear the echo of her attempt for years. Cass wrote more letters from prison. 23 by then. I kept them unopened in a box at the back of the closet. Soraya asked gently, "Will you ever read them?" I shook my head. Forgiveness is not a currency she can buy with ink. She chose betrayal. I choose distance. Nathan's mother, Marion, had vanished from Savannah's social circuit, her pearls dimmed by scandal. The Jaguar was gone, her club memberships revoked. I felt no pity. She had tried to buy my silence with envelopes, fat with shame. The world had simply returned the debt. Some nights, though, when the house was still, grief for Raphael crept in like fog from the river. I would sit in the studio, paintbrush in hand, and whisper to the empty chair across from me, "Why didn't you tell me?" He never answered. But the silence grew softer over time, as if even ghosts respected the work I was doing. One evening, Jonah stopped by, clutching a sketchbook under his arm. "I got in," he said shyly, showing me his acceptance letter to the Savannah School of Art. His smile lit the porch better than the bulb overhead. I hugged him. "Remember this," I told him. "Kindness can be louder than betrayal if you let it echo." Later that night, I stood before my latest canvas. It showed a magnolia tree, roots deep, branches wide, blossoms open to the sky. At the base, a woman stood with her back straight, her face tilted toward the light, not waiting for permission, not asking for forgiveness, just being. For decades, I had lived as Raphael's wife, as Cass's mother, as the quiet shadow in someone else's story. Now, at last, I was Elena Navarro, and my story was only beginning. Summer pressed down on Savannah, heavy with the scent of salt and jasmine. On the first truly clear morning in June, I drove out to Tybee Island, the ocean glittering like glass shards under sunlight. The tide curled over my feet, cool and insistent, as if reminding me that everything is washed clean, eventually even grief. I carried a small sketchbook and drew as I walked. Not magnolias this time, but waves. Endless, restless, unwilling to be contained. I thought of Cass, locked away with time as her only company. Of Nathan, stripped of the confidence that once clung to him like armor. Of Raphael, who had lived 2 lives and left me the burden and the gift of surviving both. When I returned to Wren Street, Jonah was waiting on the porch, his art school orientation packet tucked under his arm. "I wanted to thank you," he said, shy as ever. "Without your scholarship fund, I wouldn't even dream of this." I touched his shoulder. "Dream anyway. The world is full of people trying to write you out of your own story. Don't ever let them hold the pen." That evening, in my studio, I finished the self-portrait I'd been working on for months. A woman standing in sunlight, chin lifted, shadows falling behind her. Her expression wasn't bitter or triumphant, it was certain. I hung it on the wall and poured myself a glass of wine. Outside, cicadas began their chorus, a sound that had once meant loneliness, but now felt like accompaniment. Cass's latest letter sat unopened on the counter. I left it there. Some voices deserve silence in return. Instead, I thought of the women who had written to me through the Navarro Trust, widows in Alabama, grandmothers in South Carolina, sisters in Florida. Each letter a reminder that survival could ripple outward, reshaping more lives than my own. I walked through the house slowly, pausing in each room. For decades, it had been Raphael's kingdom, then Cass's prize. Now it was mine not because of inheritance or law or even revenge, because I had claimed it, room by room, decision by decision, breath by breath. On the porch, the fern Jonah gave me swayed in the evening breeze, leaves unfurling toward the darkening sky. I thought of something Raphael once told me, that magnolias bloom best when their roots run deep. He had meant it as comfort. Now I understood it as prophecy. I stepped back inside, closed the door, and smiled at the portrait glowing in the lamplight. The best revenge isn't destroying the people who tried to bury you. It's becoming the person they never believed you could be. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.